Students, thank you for being with me today. I'm sorry that I cannot be with you in person due to being at the conference, but what I'd like for you to do is go ahead to watch this video in its entirety and then respond to the homework assignment that's at the end of this video. So let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to talk about instructional scaffolding. Well, when you think of scaffolding, what do you think about? Good. So a lot of times we think about the scaffolding that is used in construction. Initially, when a building is going up, there is a lot of scaffolding that's put in place for support as that building is going up. However, as more and more of the building is being made or being put up, less and less scaffolding is used because it's not needed. Well, that's how we need to think of scaffolding in teaching. For the purpose of this assignment, we're going to define scaffolding as this. It's used to describe instructional techniques that are used to assist learners as they go through the learning process. Today we're going to talk about both verbal and procedural scaffolding. When I talk about verbal scaffolding, I'm talking about how the teacher is using prompts, questioning cues, or elaboration techniques to help the students deepen their understanding. For example, if a teacher asks a student a question and he or she is not getting the answer quite to the answer that the teacher is looking for, the teacher will probably provide a little bit of elaboration or some more prompts to get the student to think more deeply about whatever the answer is. That would be an example of verbal scaffolding. Another example might be when a teacher is teaching and say that he or she is presenting a word that may be unfamiliar to the students. Well, instead of just continuing on with the conversation, she or he might provide a quick definition of the unknown term. This again is an example of verbal scaffolding. Well, how does that differ from procedural? Procedural scaffolding is instructional approaches or support activities that will help the students to understand. So it's not verbal, but it's usually more of those tangibles or experiences that are put in place to help students understand the content that's being delivered. The goal of scaffolding is to ultimately transfer the knowledge and the responsibility of knowing or understanding or doing the content from the teacher to the student. Really, maybe initially with more support in the beginning from the teacher, but then the teacher transitions to less and less support so that the student is able to do the content on his or her own. So what does that look like in the direct instruction process? Well, remember when we talk about direct instruction, we're really talking about the teacher as the facilitator of the information. So really the teacher is the one who's the purveyor, who's mostly in charge or at the center of this type of lesson. So how does that look? Well, in a direct instruction model, generally the teacher is the one who presents the information first. Many times the teacher will use a graphic organizer or he or she will model what they want the students to be able to do. And then sometimes they'll provide some other visual aids like posters that are around the room to help support the facilitation of that instruction. So that's usually what's happening, is that the teacher presents the information first. Then after the teacher presents his or her information, she or he will give the students an opportunity to practice what it is that they have just learned. And usually this is a non-threatening or a low-threatening environment for the students because the teacher is there to provide assistance as they're going through that. So we often call this guided practice. Sometimes if you hear it in a I do, we do, you do phrase, this would be the section that's really the we do, where the teacher and the students are working together on the content. Then finally, in this type of model, the direct instruction model, when the teacher provides the scaffolding process, there is student independent work where the teacher generally is not there providing as direct assistance for the students. The students are often working in small groups or in collaborative pairs, one-on-one, something like that. And the teacher will actually go around and monitor any misconceptions that he or she might see using that informal observation assessment method. So that's how the process kind of looks within scaffolding. But let's consider a few questions. Where do you think that you would actually incorporate a demonstration or the use of a demonstration in this model of teaching? Well, good. If you said it's during that initial presentation of the information, that first part, if you will, you would be correct, because really a demonstration is when the teacher is showing the students what he or she is expecting them to do when they work by themselves. How about this? What is the relationship between using a graphic organizer as a support and the process of scaffolding? Okay, good. So you would use a graphic organizer as a support in the initial teaching, probably as well as in that guided practice where the teacher was referring back to the graphic organizer as an aid for the students to use. So what are graphic organizers? Really, they're just ways for the students to put their ideas on paper or to actually bring a group of ideas together so it makes sense in a way that students can understand it. A couple of examples are clusters or word webs. You might have seen these before in the classes that you're working with. Flow charts. Notice it helps students to organize information sequentially. Two-ring Venn diagram. So again, the idea is using when students need to compare and contrast information, they're able to do so using this type of graphic organizer. Okay. Facts and opinions. Again, it just this type of graphic organizer helps students to clearly see information that's grouped in a facts category versus information that's grouped in an opinion category. And finally, KWL charts. You'll see those used a lot throughout lessons where the students show what they already know. This often takes place at the beginning of a lesson. They will write down things that they want to know as related to the content of the lesson that's being taught. Again, this would probably take place at the beginning of the lesson. And then what they learned. So some ideas, some things, some understandings of what they were able to walk away with after the lesson was taught. So I'm just going to put up on the screen a couple of examples of scaffolding, and I want you to look through each one of those and think about, well, how does this type of scaffolding activity, if you will, how does this help the student to be able to retain the information more so on their own? Okay, so which one of these activities are demonstrations? Well, potentially how all of them may be used, they might be a demonstration. The teacher might actually demonstrate how to do each one of these activities in her direct instruction or in her teaching of whatever the content is being taught. Modeling. Okay, and what about supports? Okay. Again, using those graphic organizers, concept maps, if you will, that might be one example of supports. Okay, what I'd like for you to do now is you're going to watch a video of actually seeing this process used in a classroom. The teacher is not going to actually use the word scaffolding as it relates to how we defined it just a moment ago. You'll see when she's talking about scaffolding for the direct instruction model, she's actually going to use the terms I do, we do, and you do. So I want you to watch this video and see how the teacher is actually providing the instruction initially, then she's providing some guided support, and then she goes back and she allows the students to work independently, if you will.
Hi, my name is Megan Montgomery, and I'm a social studies teacher at KIPP San Francisco Bay Academy, and I teach the 5th and 6th graders.
So I know this is a book that tells facts about ancient Sumer. And I know that there are two main parts that I want to look at today and study today. And the first one is called a family farmstead. And when I look at the pictures here, I can see, looks like a lot of animals, goats, a lot of empty land.
When I am teaching strategy through the Think Aloud, I'm modeling what I'm thinking as a reader in my head, because I want the students to know what a good reader would be thinking about while they were trying to access a particular text.
So you can read along on your page with me. I'm going to read it one time through, and then I'm going to go back and think about what the facts are. Your farmstead's quite large because your father's brothers, their wives and children live with you too. Oh, so this book is pretending that I'm an ancient Sumerian and it's explaining my life to me. Each family has its own living quarters.
So today, when I was doing the Think Aloud strategy of the spoke diagram, I was thinking about how the text that I had chosen fits into that diagram and exactly what I want the students to be thinking about during the time that they are reading and they're applying this strategy. And the way that I ask the students to practice the strategy that I've taught for the day is really, I try to scaffold it very much. So I start with a think aloud, with the I do, and then we move on to a we do, which is where they sit with a partner and they might read. One way that they might read is popcorn style. Another way they might read is chorally. They might read in their heads. And then they talk about the comprehension strategy and complete it together, because we know that it's really important for students to be verbal about what they're reading and to bounce the ideas off of each other. What about the title? What's the main title here?
When it was flooding, right?
Half of the year it floods. We know the other half of the year there's a drought. Is there a big topic that's about?
Yeah, how the uncontrolled water supply.
Awesome.
I was just talking with this group, and Akila said something very wise. She was able to look at the title.
And then after the we do, then we'll come back together and share what they thought about so that I can identify any misconceptions that they have or the way that they are thinking, so I can make sure that they're on the right track.
What do you think our main topic should be here on our spoke diagram so we can organize our thoughts?
The uncontrolled water supply.
And then the last part is the you do, when I let them off on their own to try to apply the strategy themselves on a level, on a text that has an appropriate level for them. My goal for today's lesson was to teach the students for the first time how to use the spoke diagram as a way to help them organize the text in their head so that they can get all of the information that they need to out of their textbook. So I wanted them to see what I had done and then work on their own using the same kind of thought pattern to comprehend the textbook. I want the students to be able to use this graphic organizer across a variety of texts, across a variety of disciplines, and really take ownership of that as a tool they have to help them become better readers and also better writers.
What did you read about in your book?
We wrote about that they plow and you read about oxen.
Okay, does this have to do with a plow or oxen?
No.
When a student or a pair of students is having some kind of difficulty with a think aloud process, I really try to listen to them and to see what they're thinking, because a lot of times if I truly listen to what they're saying, I can understand where their thinking is breaking down. So when the class is working, I'm never standing still. I'm always going around trying to see what the students are doing, try to understand more of what they're thinking, what's working and what's not working. And then if I see there's something that's not working for a pair of students or even a bigger group of students, I'm right there to intervene and make sure that I'm guiding them to be thinking the way that I want them to be thinking.
Farmers need a faster way to prepare the land for planting. Popcorn request. The Sumerians made the first plow out of wood.
When students are able to use a graphic organizer during the time that they're reading, it helps them make sense of the text in a way that's accessible and visual for them. For example, in today's text, there were a lot of facts about the ancient Sumerians that I wanted the students to be able to understand. And when the students are reading a text that's so packed with facts, it can be difficult for them to determine what the main ideas are and versus what the details are, and to find out what are the most important things. So when I use the spoke diagram, it's a way for them to visually break down the text into the main points, the subpoints, and the details that are supporting that. And when they can see that all laid out in front of them, it helps them to say, oh, okay, this is what the text is really about, and this is what I'm needing to know. I'm definitely seeing a lot of improvement in the way that our students are able to comprehend the material that they're reading. I know that I'm seeing a lot of improvement because of the kinds of diagnostic tools and the assessments that I'm using, and I'm typically seeing between 2 and 3 years growth from our students in their ability to comprehend.
Okay. right, so as you are watching this video, let me make sure that we're running. Okay, so as you were watching this video, one of the things you probably noticed that she used was the graphic organizer, as well as modeling the procedural scaffolding, where she did the initial instruction, she did some guided practice, and then she let the students work on their own. Why do you think it was wise for her to have that graphic organizer, helping the students to write down key information and facts, especially as it was related to a social studies lesson? Okay, good, because social studies concepts can be fairly difficult if you're just reading and then trying to retain what was read, but using a type of graphic organizer helps the students to begin to pick out what are those key pieces of information, and then putting them down in a way that's visually appealing and that can actually help the students make sense of what the text was saying. So that's why we often have graphic organizers when we do different types of lessons. Okay, let's keep going. So let's actually look at what an example of how we might be able to scaffold a CCGPS standard. I want you to imagine that you're in a 7th grade writing and social studies course, where today you have to make sure that you cover both of these standards. I want you to take a minute and just read through each one of these standards, and then we're going to talk about how you might be able to create a lesson that has scaffolding within it. Okay, so you've had a moment to read through. Let's see if you were able to think about some ideas of how you would scaffold this lesson, how they might actually compare to the example that I'm putting up. And it doesn't have to be the same way. We might scaffold lessons a little bit differently, but here's just, again, an idea. So the first thing you might want to do is actually preview an example of what a correct response might look like. Many times in my classroom, I would preview examples, what I called examples and non-examples. So I wanted the students to act or write a certain way, so I would provide an example of something that was considered proficient, and then other times I would provide for them a non-example, which is something that I did not want them to do, so that way they could have a difference or an understanding between the two. So then afterwards you might display a thinking map. There's a graphic organizer that's partially filled in. And why do you partially fill it in? Well, it helps the students to begin to see how you're thinking and what are some specific examples of what they might need to provide. So if we continue on, you might ask the students to help you fill in the remainder of the thinking map. So that helps them to begin to be on the same page with you. Another good idea is when you have whatever example you're working on the front board or on chart paper or PowerPoint, you may want to have the students have another copy in front of them, so that way you can help those kinesthetic learners and those visual learners as well to interact with the information that you're interacting with. After that, you might show them a copy of a partially finished writing piece that correlates with the information that you began on your thinking map. So you've showed them kind of how you're thinking about the process, and now you're showing them how you are thinking about writing the actual information related to both the social studies and writing standard. Then you may have the students maybe rewrite some of that information together with you. So you're doing some shared writing and helping them to begin to develop their writing structures or writing procedures. And then you might even end it off where you're putting them in small groups or collaborative pairs. Maybe you have some students who are working one-on-one or by themselves, and they can begin to replicate or do this assignment on their own. So now you see where we've started, where the teacher's providing the instruction, doing some guided practice with the students, and then after they've been able to work through some examples, then allowing them to go off and do it on their own. So that's some examples of how scaffolding might look in a direct instruction lesson. So your homework this week, what you are going to do is you're actually going to prepare and deliver a 5 to 10 minute lesson on the content of your choice. This content or topic may be related to a CCGPS standard. If you have a favorite hobby or sport and you want to teach a mini lesson on that, you may do that. Something in the news. This, I'm going to give you free reign to teach a topic of your choice. Now, Whatever the topic is that you choose, you are going to have to provide it in a 5 to 10 minute lesson and include an I do, we do, and you do model of direct instruction. Within that I do, you do, we do, I'm going to be looking for 3 specific things. I'm going to be looking at how you've provided a model of what it is that you want the students to do, or a demonstration of what it is that of the topic that you're speaking on. I'm going to look for a graphic organizer or a thinking map, and it can be presented during the I do part, or that direct teacher instruction. It can be presented during the you do, or when the students are working with you. And then I want you to provide one example where you use verbal scaffolding, meaning that you're using questionings or promptings, or you're providing a quick definition to help the students to begin to do some of that deeper thinking. Now, after you've decided what topic you want to prepare and how you're going to deliver it, I want you to record this topic. And again, it's 5 to 10 minutes. It does not need to be longer than 10 minutes. If you can hit all of these aspects in a 5-minute video, I'm okay with that. So record yourself teaching this lesson, and I want you to upload it in the assignment submission tab that you're going to see in the week 6 folder. So again, this is not something that should be very difficult. It's just you presenting a quick mini lesson where you're teaching. We would then try to do a I do, we do, you do direct instruction model, including all of those 3 characteristics. Okay, so what did we talk about today? Today we defined scaffolding. We said that scaffolding is a term that's used to describe instructional techniques to assist learners as they go through the learning process. 2 examples are verbal scaffolds and procedural scaffolding. We also identified the goal. What is the goal of scaffolding? Well, really it's so that the teacher can release the responsibility of the knowledge or the content of the lesson to the students so that they become the facilitators of the information. And then we talked about how you would record a mini lesson where you're using various scaffolding techniques. So that's all we're going to talk about today. Good luck with your mini lesson. I look forward to watching your videos, and I'll see you in a little bit.